Hi, I'm Richard Karn, and you may have seen me on TV talking about the world's #1 expandable garden hose. Well, the brand new Pocket Hose Copperhead with Pocket Pivot is here, and it's a total game changer. Old-fashioned hoses get kinks and creases at the spigot, but the Copperhead's Pocket Pivot swivels 360 degrees for full water flow and freedom to water with ease all around your home. When you're all done, this rust-proof anti-burst hose shrinks back down to pocket size for effortless handling and tidy storage. Plus, your super light and ultra-durable Pocket Hose Copperhead is backed with a 10-year warranty. What could be better than that? I'll tell you what, an exciting exclusive offer just for you. For a limited time, you can get a free Pocket Pivot and their 10-pattern sprayer with the purchase of any size Copperhead hose. Just text WATER to 64,000. That's WATER to 64,000 for your 2 free gifts with purchase. WATER to 64,000.
By texting 64,000, you agree to receive recurring automated marketing messages from Pocket Hose. Message and data rates may apply. No purchase required. Terms apply. Available at pockethose.com/terms.
You have unread texts from Golf Buds. Would you like me to read them?
Yes.
Okay. Johnny says, what are the nicotine pouches you had on the course? Walker says, 8 milligram on nicotine pouches. Billy says, I love the mint one.
I like that one.
Walker says, me too. By the way, you both stink at golf. LOLOL.
Come on. Carry on nicotine pouches. Shop now at onnicotine.com/group text. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical.
This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you so much for tuning into the program. It's Wednesday, June the 18th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams, he's produced the program. You'll be speaking with David when you pick up the phone to give us a shout, get in the queue and on the air. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. Oh boy, the Stanley Cup Finals came to a fizzle. So the Florida Panthers, back-to-back Stanley Cup champions after defeating the Edmonton Oilers for the second straight year. Oilers just went out very weak fashion, lost 5-1 yesterday. The goal they did score was in garbage time. Sam Reinhart with 4 goals, becoming the 6th player in league history, the first since Maurice the Rocket Richard in 1957, scored 4 goals in a Stanley Cup final game. Anyway, there you go. And Sam Bennett, Conn Smythe winner. Too bad for the Oil. Congrats to the Panthers. All right, let's keep going. First 6 players named to the team candidate for the next upcoming Winter Olympics. Kind of predictable names. Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar, Sam Reinhart, Braden Point, Connor McDavid. Can't imagine it's going to be a whole lot different looking team from the 4 Nations Cup winning squad. But anyway, there you go on that one. And this is a great story. I don't know if you know who Peter Hanlon is. So Peter Hanlon, for the last almost 3 decades, I think, working for the Calgary Flames, or working in pro hockey, he's now been appointed to be one of the assistant general managers of the Calgary Flames. He was the VP of communications for a long time. Now there's 2 people from the city of St. John's, from this province, who are executives in the NHL. Derek Clancy, assistant general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and now Peter Hanlon. Amazing stuff. Even more interesting is both Peter Hanlon and Derek Clancy went to St. Pat's and then Brother Rice. So from that little pocket, 2 assistant general managers in the NHL. On a quick personal note, Peter Hanlon's father and my father were next door neighbors in Riverhead as kids. So that's pretty interesting there. Anyway, it is for me. Sticking with St. Mary's Bay for a bit. So apparently the whales are in St. Vincent's. It's about an hour and a half drive from town. We try to get out there every year because it is an incredible experience. Now, if you choose to go on a tour boat to see the whales and the puffins and the icebergs, best kind. But it is a really unique opportunity to be so close to the whales. There's an immense drop-off very close to the shore, and you can smell them. I mean, they are right there. It almost feels like you can touch them, but apparently the whales are in St. Vincent's, if you're interested in that kind of stuff. All right. I keep getting stories and emails from families who have children on the wait list to see a speech-language pathologist or to get speech-language therapy. So there's a bit of a disconnect here. So apparently the numbers have not changed insofar as those working with NL Health Services in quite a long time. So there's 70 speech-language pathologists serving children under the age of 5 and adults on a full-time basis. Additional 6 SLPs, as they say, work casually with the health authority. All right. So the health authority says that there's been 5 postings for speech-language pathologists and nobody's applied for them. But at the exact same time, we have heard directly from speech-language pathologists who want to work in the public sector and can't get a job. So which is it? Because it can't be both. So the wait times are extraordinarily long. And the complications, depending on the type of treatment and support or therapy that you need, outcomes can obviously be different, but the wait times are unnecessarily long. Then you look at getting to children where they are. In school. And we should get to them before they get to school. 45 speech-language pathologists in the schools. Okay, they serve over 200 schools. 20 serve schools on the Avalon Peninsula, according to the department. But here's the problem there. The prevalence of the need for this type of therapy has grown, we're told, exponentially over the past few decades. For what reason, I have no earthly idea. But the numbers of people working in the system has not changed in 30 years. So if the needs are growing, but the staffing and the professionals to offer said therapy are not growing, then we're creating ourselves a problem. This will come with significant costs, not just to those families. It is a bigger deal than I think we're giving it credit for. I continue to hear the stories, and the parents are at wit's end. You know, for those who are lucky enough to have some insurance that can help cover costs and or have the deep pockets where they can go to a private therapist, that's good. But for the families who don't, this becomes a huge big deal. So the stories are really heart-wrenching, but feel free to continue sending them along. All right. Let's talk about my power bill and your power bill. So I guess it was Monday when we got an update from the PUB about what will happen to our power rates on the 1st of July of this year. So in essence, the PUB said that the stories were initially reported incorrectly. There is going to be a 7% increase, but what they say is rate smoothing. It could have been 15%. All right. So it's important to get the numbers right, obviously. But there is still huge consternation out there about cost of living issues. And yes, a power bill increase of 7% is not insignificant. In addition to that, let's dig into some of the updated numbers coming from Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro. All right, so where do I have those here? All right, first off, let's get into the fact that they did announce during their most recent update about adding 11 additional ultra-fast charging stations for electric vehicles along the highway. So for the chargers that are out there now, it can take over an hour. Apparently these ultra-fast options can do it in less than 20 minutes, so that's helpful. So okay, we've heard from consumer advocate Dennis Brown in the past about the costs associated with these EV charging stations. And his assertion is it shouldn't be anybody but the electrical vehicle operators to pay for these in full. I don't know if you agree with that, but I'll put that out there because he was really quite firm with that stance that he took on this program, whenever that was. The demand is up. Apparently, Hydro says in 2024, they saw a 40% increase in the number of charging sessions at its charging stations. And that's compared to 2023. So demand's not going away. And if anyone's ever going to want to buy an electric vehicle, and that's up to you whether or not you want one, you have to have a place to charge it. So the question will be, for many, is why should I pay for your charging station? I'm just putting that out there as a point that you can consider and possibly call on. Sticking with Hydro. Remember when the Auditor General, in one of the most recent reports, said one of the pieces of information or the bodies of information that Denise Hanrahan and her team did not have was a more detailed breakdown of the rate mitigation money coming from Hydro to try to stabilize our rates, even though we're still going to see an annual increase of 2.25%. All right, let's see here. This comes from Newfoundland Labrador Hydro's Chief Financial Officer. The utility recorded $479 million of net income in 2024. That's down from $619 million in 2023, largely because of rate mitigation. All right. They did see a $111 million increase in revenue from export sales of energy, obviously. But here you go. The use of $90 million of funds that came from various operations for rate mitigation. Hydro's posting a loss in the first quarter of 2025. That hasn't happened in years. The result is, of course, because a $441 million transfer for rate mitigation applied in February. So we do know that they're talking about $2 billion over the course of 6 years to try to control the rates. What we don't know is what happens after that. Now, some of the numbers that we see insofar as some of the transfer dollars, what have you. Here's one. Oil and gas of $114 million reduction in net income for 2024, mostly because, of course, the Sea Rose FPSO was offline. There was reduced operations at both Hebron and Hibernia. Those are now back to where they could or should be. So, yeah, it'd be nice to know a little bit more about how this is going to impact operations at Hydro and what it means for the government's general coffers. You know, will we simply be backfilling Hydro's lost revenues because of rate mitigation from the provincial government? That's just sort of a circle, because we're all kind of one and the same. So there's some of the updated numbers. And on that front, we can continue to talk about the issues regarding the Upper Churchill. A couple of quick ones on that. Okay. So, a few things. So when the Eastern Canadian premiers are meeting with their counterparts south of the border, a lot of it focusing on the economy and trade and, yes, energy. One of the comments coming directly from the premier, though, let's see if I can find the actual quote so that I don't shag this up. They're talking about, actually, okay, here's the quote. They will have increased ability to get energy, not from Canada generally, but specifically from Newfoundland and Labrador. What energy? We don't really have any to sell. Certainly no copious amounts. So is that in reference to yet to be produced natural gas, of which there's no royalty regime? We have seen the assessment just in the Jeanne d'Arc Basin of almost 10 trillion cubic feet is about offshore wind that has not yet come to pass, because the current state of hydro availability is limited for sale. So not entirely sure what that means. And then, of course, we'll talk about potential federal interest in the Upper Churchill expansion, the transmission projects, Gull Island, because that can indeed change the conversation. No question about it. So energy from here? Okay. Also, interestingly, just yesterday, the top size for West White Rose arrived in Bull Arm. Then to be coupled, of course, with the concrete gravity structure, which begs the question about Bull Arm. So we know there's an ongoing possibility for two entities, NARL and for DF Barnes, to potentially, possibly, who knows, take over the leasing of Bull Arm and or full ownership of Bull Arm, which further prompts questions that people ask all the time, understandably so, is about the next wave of projects. We know there's a big slowdown in the world of these big construction projects. Look no further than the fact that we're told by Trades NL 74% of their 14,000 members are currently unemployed, given the wrapped up construction phases that we've seen on a variety of things, Cornerbrook Hospital, West White Rose, all those types of things, the mental health and addictions facility. So what those benefits agreements look like and our reliance on these big projects to keep our tradespeople employed, absolutely on top of the radar for me if it's of interest to you. All right. I think we're anticipating a phone call this morning from Minister Sarah Studley and, of course, the member for Mount Sion, which incorporates or encapsulates Ken Mount Terrace. So yesterday, an announcement about the school. All right. So $41.9 million contract awarded to Olympic Construction. They say some of the sluggish start here is that there was very few, if no, bids, no interest from the private sector to build the school. I wonder why that would be. Anyway, we'll dig into it with Minister Studley. So if you want to put some questions on my radar, happy to take them. Email, Twitter, whatever the case may be. So the obvious ones are, they're still sticking with the timeline to have the school open for September 2026. That's 18 months. It feels awfully ambitious to me. Then they'll talk about the size of the school. So 43 classrooms for students, pre-kindergarten to grade 7, anticipated to be able to house or hold 860 students. But it looks like their catchment area is much more like 1,000 students. So with both Larkall and Learysbrook being well over capacity now, what does that look like in the course of the next, well, what until ever it opens? Because, look, fingers crossed they can hit their timeline, but that seems extremely ambitious to me. So we'll see if we can get some more information from Minister Studley for you. Jill Croak, who's the mother of 2 students at Larkall Academy, of course she's happy with what she heard, but she wants to see transparency for the government over planning and timelines. That would be interesting to see if we can't get some of that today. Also, kind of feels like an election year. An announcement about Her Majesty's Penitentiary, or the replacement for. All right. So it's going to be built. All right. Groundbreaking is now taking place. Preparation on the site, of course, up on East White Hills Road. It's going to be a 28,000 square metre facility, house 300 beds, and hopefully some sort of focus on treatment and rehabilitation. Also going to be services for female inmates, a wellness space for staff members, All right. I don't know when the news story that I read this morning said it was first announced in 2019. Maybe that's the most recent first announcement, but here we are. At that time, they had an affordability envelope of about $200 million. At that time, it came in, they had initially set aside $200 million. The province said they could afford $325 million and then consequently did not proceed. Now here we are. The replacement is going to cost an expected $697 million. So quite clearly, the dragging of feet here has cost us, and dramatically so. Then I think we really deserve a more thorough, comprehensive conversation about the choice to build a lot of this infrastructure with public-private partnerships. There are some provinces that they will not touch this with a 10-foot pole. For me, it feels very similar to the conversation regarding the amount of money that came to Newfoundland and Labrador in the big tobacco settlement. And without having all the money in hand, the government applied every cent of it this year to the deficit. It kind of feels like a bit of an illusion. Sometimes when you look at the P3s, it feels that way to me as well. So, of course, it won't be debt on the government books, but it's a debt that we're going to pay, but it just is the accounting practice is different. So, for the most part, P3s, when examined, for instance, one of my friends who was living in Nova Scotia in the 90s, their Auditor General at the time did a deep dive into what it would have looked like for the public sector to build as traditionally they did versus the P3s. And on every instance, the P3 ended up costing more. So it's a bit of a feel-good today, maybe not feel so great 30 years from now. So we continue to do it. Hospitals, the mental health and addiction facility, out in Corner Brook, the long-term care facilities in Central. It's been the go-to. But years ago, I seem to remember, every time it was broached, the NDP and organised labour would be quite vociferous in saying we cannot and should not do this. That kind of changed when Paul Davis was the Premier and those questions were being asked by Labour, and then we were told, well, the workforce can be unionised. That seemed to temper the concerns brought forward by organised labour associations or organisations. But that's not necessarily the end of the conversation for me. If you want to take it on, we can do it. And speaking of the HNP and stuff, so there was an allegation or a report that was circulating wide and far on social media about a story where a woman was approached by a man pretending to frantically look for a lost dog. She helps, and consequently there was a report of a sexual assault. The RNC said no such report has been made. Whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing for someone to post a scenario that may not have actually happened, how do we digest that? You know, it certainly won't be helpful for folks who have actually been victims, but maybe it can also be helpful for that careful, gentle reminder that we need to offer each other about the lengths that people will go to lure you into a dangerous situation. Whether it be with buying something online, whether it be, you know, for our children, warning that if anyone offers you candy or to come look at a puppy in the car, all those types of things which might put you in a precarious spot. Because sometimes we're just a little bit footloose and fancy-free and just trying to be helpful and or curious, and something dastardly can happen. So I don't know if there's anything to the report, nor am I entirely sure how to adjust or, to absorb the report, but it's floating around and I got a bunch of emails about it too, so let's take it on. All right, so the G7 is in the books. A bit of a fiasco, if you ask me. So whether or not it's an issue about what was achieved or what was not on trade deals with the Americans, and speaking of Canada, with the potential to hammer out a trade deal, a new one with the United States, which is an unjustified, idiotic piece of business, but then the president in and out in about 12 hours. Some questions that come from that, absolutely. Some people will focus in on the news that the country has pledged another $4.3 billion worth of Canadian support for Ukraine. Let's break that down a little bit, because a bunch of the emails I've got kind of read like it was $4.3 billion worth of cash. The sum is $2 billion for the purchase and donation of weapons and material, which is questionable given the lack of preparedness for Canada's military. Secondly, $2.3 billion loan. And people will ask, well, how's Ukraine ever going to rebuild this? The plan is to have it repaid by interest on the frozen Russian assets. So that's how the $4.3 billion breaks down, and we can talk about that however you see fit. You know, I guess the question would be, how much to help now versus what it might cost after if the world turns its back on Ukraine and gets steamrolled by the Russians. And then you add in leaving comments coming from the president bemoaning the fact that Russia was out of what was then the G8, turning it into the G7, blaming it on Trudeau, of course, who was not the prime minister when it all happened. So it was just a really confusing bit of a gong show in many areas. But if you want to talk about what we saw, what we heard. Last point I'll make on that front. I saw this reported and I thought, wow, this is a pretty big story. And then it went away. And I don't think I've heard anyone talk about it since. And this was a story that was in The Economist. And it said that the people who are apparently involved in the negotiations, is that the United States would be guaranteed first right of refusal on Canadian resources. Now, the United States is our largest customer for most everything, and first right of refusal is not necessarily a bad thing, but it is a curious story that got no traction that I've seen out there, but yet that was posted and published in The Economist, and then it went away. So I wonder what that actually means in the big scheme of things, but anyway, we can take it on. Let's see here. There's an evacuation alert in Badger. It may turn into an evacuation order. We don't know. Oh, I just saw that out of the corner of my eye. Badger Mayor Dennis Butt is in the queue to talk about it. But what we will do is, whether we talk with Mayor Butt now and or any developments throughout the course of the morning, while I'm still here, whenever we have additional information, we'll be happy to share it. Also, on the heels of this program this morning, VOCM, the Stingray Radio Network, including Big Land FM, we're going to be hosting a Mental Health Matters radiothon in support of Dollar a Day Foundation. So that's going to happen from 12 to 4. I think I'm over there for 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, but please do tune in, and if you have the capacity, please get ready to make a donation if at all possible. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, we're going to start with Badger Mayor Dennis Butt, and then we're speaking with you. Topic up to you. Don't go away. Welcome back. Very quickly, I mentioned Peter Hanlon with the Calgary Flames, Derek Clancy with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I forgot Rob Maloney. He's the Senior Vice President, Ticket Sales and Service for both the Winnipeg Jets and the Manitoba Moose. That's the company called True North. Okay, more serious matters. Let's go to line number one. Say good morning to the Mayor of Badger. That's Dennis Butt. Mayor Butt, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
Better times for sure.
Give us a status update.
Yeah, so the situation currently now, I guess, is tense, and we can call it emergent. A lot of nervous residents. So the latest as of early this morning is that there was an assessment made by forestry. They had helicopters in the air. They consulted with emergency services and advised that the town issue evacuation alert, which is what we done. So a lot of coordination has happened since then, a lot of behind-the-scenes pieces. We have our local volunteer fire department mobilized. We have a large presence. All of our vehicles are out. Equipment, auxiliary pumps, etc., are being positioned, making sure that they're operational, which they are, but I guess they're just double-checking. With extra resources such as fuel, etc. So yeah, we're just in the coordination piece there now, Patty. Just obviously we'll hope for the best, and things change drastically, then we'll try to be as best prepared as possible.
So obviously an evacuation order would come with the proximity of the fire to the town, but what do residents need to know about, like for instance, do you get an evacuation order that says we want you gone in 30 minutes or 60 minutes? So what do they need to know to be prepared?
Yeah, so first and foremost, the evacuation alert, individuals should just, be prepared for that. And what I mean by that is pack some essentials, pack as much as you need, but as lean as possible. Personal items, IDs, wallets, passports if necessary, medications, personal documents, those types of things, and obviously some articles of clothes, those pieces. When it comes to the actual evacuation notice and time frames with regards to what that will look like, I don't want to speculate what that will look like until it actually came, Patty, because we're not sure.
Who makes the call?
Oh, you're very welcome.
No, who makes the call eventually whether or not there might be an evacuation order?
I thought you said thanks for the call.
No.
Excuse me. That would be in consultation with government services, emergency services, and forestry. I guess all parties will consult. So we'll assess the scene. They're they're forecasting today as being a bad day for fire production with regards to wind speeds, temperatures, etc. They had a helicopter deployed from Appleton this morning, supposed to be in the air at 7 o'clock, another one being dispatched from St. John's, as well as 2 water bombers from the Gander area and another larger water bomber coming in from Goose Bay, and I guess they'll do the rotational pieces with the fire on that. They'll make those calls. So that's some of the resources that they have put in place. But with regards to the evacuation notice, that'll be in consultation with government services, and that's required on our end. And we'll make that in consultation with, obviously, the experts with the provincial government.
This is a question on a personal note. Like, we hear stories out in Flin Flon and other parts of the big wildfires out west, and last summer Churchill Falls and Lab City, where leaders like mayors stayed behind while everybody else left. Now, eventually people had to leave regardless. Even, Churchill Falls is unique because staff to stay behind to take care of the generating station. But what's your plan as mayor and for other members of council? Are you planning on staying longer than maybe the residents, and if so, why?
Well, that'll be assessed ongoingly if there's a need for a presence within town. Obviously, I wouldn't put myself or any of members of council or town employees or any resident at risk just to stay behind, because we'll assess that accordingly. We have personal plans put in place now. I guess my family are home and preparing the same as everyone in the community. Members of our fire department, council, town employees are all on site. But that's the logistical piece from their professional roles, but they have families to look after as well. So, there's 2 aspects there. These individuals, volunteers, council employees, stay behind as long as what's needed and what's possible. Now, if members need to leave because of family reasons, commitments, etc., we don't discourage that. We highly encourage individuals to stay behind and help if it's safe to do so when we're in need. But we have resources available from the province if we don't have the resources. If an evacuation notice comes and we are asked to stay behind to do A, B, and C, we got the local fire departments in Grand Falls, Windsor, and elsewhere that will assist also. So once again, I guess, Patty, recurring response with regards to we'll assess the situation in the moment and we'll make the best decision that we can on the facts that we have.
Let's hope that the forecasted weather, wind and temperature does not result in a bad situation becoming worse today. I wish you and your residents the very best, and thanks for making time for the show, Mayor. And if there's any update between the course of now and 12 o'clock, feel free to get back on.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Take good care. Bye-bye. As Dennis Bott, he's the mayor of Badger, so some tense times there. And the fire season is off to a pretty fiery start. I mean, there are a ton of fires that have already been burning and thankfully put out in this province at this moment in time. Fire bans in place, and here we are. It's just the 18th of June, and the fire bans are in place in Metro. And we hear stories like there's a fire apparently up around Churchill Falls again this morning. We don't know how many active fires there are at this moment. I can find that number, but off to a very early start to the wildfire season. Let's go and take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to the Minister of Government Modernisation and Service Delivery. Also, the member for the voting district of Mount Sion, which the Kenmount Terrace School will be built in. Joining on the line is Minister Sarah Studley. Minister Studley, you're on the air.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Patty.
Good morning to you. Can you help us understand the reports about the lack of response to the initial RFP?
Oh, absolutely. I guess first I just want to send my thoughts out to the people of Badger. I can't imagine how stressful it is to be, watching this kind of alert. And thanks to all the first responders who are, in the helicopters, the pilots, everyone who's going to be on the ground and watching this today and throughout forest fire season. So I just wanted to get that out there first, Patty.
Okay.
So thank you. So in terms of the delay, I guess thinking back to when we had the town hall, and I was trying to think how could I have done this differently, but, the transportation infrastructure gave us a schedule that saw the school opening in 2026, which, we were very excited about. So then trying to follow that to a T to make sure that we kept to that schedule. We put out the RFP in early November, and my understanding, Patty, is that unfortunately we didn't get any bids on that until March. So the RFP had to kept getting extended and extended. My understanding is there was a lot of uncertainty about tariffs, the impact on price of goods, just general kind of uncertainty in that regard. And so unfortunately, like if we had gotten bids, in the month that we had opened the RFP, we could have seen the school open in September because it's an 18-month contract for design and build of the school. So when they got bids in March and April, and then that closed, and then there's all these procurement processes that have to happen, which then saw us awarding the contract, thankfully, last week to Olympic Construction, and they still have an 18-month delivery date. So I'm going to be working with Olympic to try and remove any government barriers or any barriers I can that will slow their progress to make sure that they can meet that 18-month timeline. And so, I know everyone wants to know when the school is going to be open. I think it's too early yet to say whether it will be, late 2026, early 2027. I did have a meeting as early as 2 days ago where there are plans in place for how we could move some students in there earlier, depending on how the school is ready. Because partway the discussion is now, well, when it's ready partway through the school year, we can't just move everyone in at the same day. So what does that look like in terms of moving different grades or classes, or maybe pre-K, for example, into a new school? And so that it's too early, I guess, to plan that yet because they just got started yesterday. But I'm so excited that it's finally getting started.
It does sound and feel very ambitious when you compare it to the size and the magnitude of Waterford Valley High, which took far longer than 18 months. I know you're not the infrastructure minister, but contractors, including one during my comments off the top of the program, said we looked at the RFP and had to go back to government for details to even try to figure out whether or not we wanted to bid on it and how much we should bid on it, because the RFP itself was short on required details for the private sector to make bids. Can you speak to that?
That's the first I'm hearing of that concern. I'll certainly take that away, but I'm not in those rooms in the transportation infrastructure department, I guess. Obviously, I'm trying to move this forward at every step of the gate. And so now, I guess, working with Olympic, my focus now is on removing any barriers they have with government or anyone else that I can help with so that they can have as aggressive timeline as possible.
Okay, so it's going to be 11,800 square feet, 43 classrooms, pre-K to grade 7, hold 860 students. But even the catchment of Larkhall and Learysbrook is more like 1,000 students. So what do you say to that capacity issue? Because, we're not talking about insignificant money, and it's so important to have this built appropriately. We might be underbuilding here. Your thoughts?
So I've had that concern. So I also want to say it's 860 plus the 60 pre-K. So the pre-K is not included in the number of K to 12 students. So there'll be 3 classes of pre-K in the new school. So, I've sat in rooms with all of these, like the most senior people in these departments, showing them the city projections from the city of St. John's and like assuming there's going to be 1,000 extra houses in Camelot Terrace and having those discussions. And I'm assured that this is the school for that space. I guess there's also a hesitation that for that kind of younger age where we're talking about, pre-K, 4 and 5-year-olds up, that I think this will be the biggest school of that age range. And we don't want to build like a 3,000 person school, but they assure me that this school will fit the purpose. And I hope I don't have to call back in 5 years' time if I'm still here and correct myself on that.
Yeah, because, you can configure schools to adjust for the little kids with their own interests, like at Vanier. If you're going to kindergarten, you have your own kindergarten door, so they don't get exposed to the enormity of this big school. So I think I understand that concern. But let's stick with Learysbrook and Larkhall. They're over capacity now. Talk about losing libraries and gyms. There's no outdoor space. So while parents of those children are waiting for this school to be built, whether or not it's big enough remains to be seen. But what has to happen right now with those 2 schools? Because they are over capacity. The classrooms are jammed. They're losing amenities. So is there any plan to do something to accommodate what is already a stressful situation in just those 2 schools?
So that's a great question, and I want to thank, I have a lot of parents that do a lot of advocacy for their children who go to Larkhall and Learysbrook, so I thank them for that. And this is a discussion I have definitely a few times a week with Department of Education and Transportation Infrastructure. So as of, 2 days ago, there's no plans to the library and the cafeteria will be used as a library and cafeteria and will not have classroom space there. And I know, even speaking with the ministry yesterday, that's a priority for them as well. They did do a review of space. I believe there are some spaces that are bigger that they're thinking how best they could use for classroom space. But as of right now, and based on the current projections for September, the library and the cafeteria will stay as is. I've had a lot of discussions with the parents about outdoor space. I mean, obviously, there's very limited things that we can do. And those two buildings were designed as a campus. And so there is an outdoor space at Larkall, which the Leary's Brook children use. Ideally, that's more. They get to use that more rather than less. That would fall to the individual, administrators and teachers in terms of using that. But what I am doing is, because I know that there's so many children that walk across Larkall Street numerous times a day from those schools, and with my speed camera hat on, I've told the team that we need to have a speed camera there by September on Larkall Street to help protect the safety of those students that cross Larkall Street. I know there's kind of bumps in to control traffic flow, but we need a speed camera there to make sure that cars do not speed so that we can protect those children.
Even at Larkall Academy, the forecast for 70 new kindergarten students, and we've been told by the school community that they eclipse those numbers year after year. New families moving into the district, moving into the neighbourhood, whether it be newcomers to Canada or otherwise. So that 70 is going to be the bare minimum of kindergarten students, so says the folks at Larkall Academy. So is there anything in the contract that has floating timelines, or is it simply a matter of Olympic gets it built when Olympic gets it built?
Well, part of the bid and the contract is that it's an 18-month contract. I'm not sure about the penalties or incentives to complete it on time, but I guess my understanding is that it can be achieved in 18 months. And I was talking to the construction crew yesterday, and they've identified some risks for me that could hold them up. And so my job now is to try and remove those risks for them so that they can be as aggressive as possible with the build. Can you give us an example of a risk they've identified? Well, I think it's too early to say. I'm still trying to, obviously when you're building a project like that, and there's houses and there's power lines and there's, City of St. John's and there's land use, all these different types of things. So, that's going to be one of my top priorities now is helping them remove any obstacles so that they can do what they do best and build the school as fast as possible. We're talking about the PwC catchment area. So where does St. Andrews fall in all this? For a while, it felt like St. Andrews was part of this conversation, then they weren't part of it, then they were in, then they were out. What role does St. Andrews School play in this? Yeah, so St. Andrews is a very important school in the PwC system, and they do have a lot of students. So St. Andrews will, once a new school opens, St. Andrews will become a K-3, and then after grade 3, the St. Andrews students will go to the new school in Kenmount Terrace for grades 4 to 7, and then in grade 8, because the Kenmount Terrace school is going to go up to grade 7, and then in grade 8 to 12 will be PwC. This is a little bit different, but I think it encapsulates both education and your role as minister responsible for the chief information officer. When we talk about the Power School Hack and the new privacy commissioners having a look at what may have not been done to protect the information, what has been done since to further protect the information, can you give us an update on your work with the privacy commissioner to get down to brass tacks on that front? Sure. So I know that the OCIO, so the government IT team, and so the education IT still falls within the Department of Education. So there's kind of a collaborative working relationship there. They're working with the Privacy Commissioner on that. I guess separately, in terms of just public sector IT overall, and from a cybersecurity perspective, we review and have been, since I was in this role previously, how can the core government support all these entities? And now, NL Schools is brought in within government. Where are our risks, and how do we assign, how do we prioritize our cybersecurity spend to reduce the biggest risks as possible? So I think that's obviously in education. Since education has moved in, it moved into core government, that's been a key focus in terms of how do we prioritize cybersecurity issues or concerns that may be there? How do we reduce that risk? and putting on our cybersecurity hat. Like I do feel like the public expects that if a crown corporation or a separate entity, is hit with a cyber issue, they do expect that core government is involved or helps remediate that issue. So we do have a new cybersecurity team that their focus is on sharing information, bringing that expertise to organizations that might be smaller, that might not have that expertise, so that we can hopefully kind of raise all boats in terms of managing cybersecurity risk and bringing up that level to better protect the public data.
And of course, the new Privacy Commissioner is Kerry Hatfield, appointed back in December of last year. I appreciate the time this morning, Minister. Anything else quickly before we say goodbye?
No, I just want to thank the parents for their advocacy for the new school, and I do want to thank the first responders, and my thoughts go out to the people of Badger as they deal with this very stressful situation.
Thank
you, Patty.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Sarah Studley. The Liberal member from Mount Sion. If there's something we didn't get to there and you want to send me an email about it, I'll follow up and get whatever answers I can get to questions that we might not have asked. Let's take a break. When we come back, lots of show left for you. Don't go away. Welcome back. Let's go to line number 1. Good morning, Rob. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you doing today?
Excellent today. How about you?
Oh, hanging in there.
Good.
I just like to talk about the fires and stuff like that. I've talked before. I was in Fort McMurray when the fire went through Fort Mac, and Newfoundland has got one of the best systems in the world for doing the firefighting remediation. Like, they know what to do before it's going to happen. And I just wish the rest of the country would take, a little bit of Newfoundland and their people to, this is how you make it work best.
What does that mean?
Badger out there right now. So Badger out there right now. So they've already got an emergency alert out, and everybody's getting ready. Whereas in Alberta, at the time in 2016, they had no plan whatsoever. They didn't care what was going on. They figured they had it all in hand. And I just think Newfoundland needs the big slap in the back to say thank you, and for everybody, they do it right. They do it right here in Newfoundland.
Well, that's a good thing. Fort McMurray is an interesting case study because for years prior to that devastating fire, there was lots of efforts to build another access point to Fort McMurray because it's one way in, one way out, which makes it extremely precarious when you're talking about a mass evacuation in a place like that.
Yes, no, exactly. And they never did do anything about it. It's still the same. I also have to say, I heard a thing yesterday, I think. Mr. Callahan was out at the groundbreaking at the new penitentiary that's going to be built, and people flicking their cigarettes around. And, that's just disgusting. I'm a smoker myself, but I've never, ever flicked a cigarette out my window. No matter what, if it's pouring rain or whatever, I still do not do that. And, people got to realize pop bottles and water bottles, they create fires too. Just from the reflection from the sun that goes through the water, it creates, it's just unbelievable that people still do this.
Personal responsibility is going to have to be, amped up here. Everything's so dry everywhere. There's a lot of brown, not a lot of green. So whether it be even the exhaust in your ATV, whether it's your cigarette butt or whatever the case may be, there's lots of ways you can inadvertently be responsible for what might be a devastating fire. So everyone just needs to be very mindful of this.
Yes, I've put out fires from people flicking cigarettes when I was out in Fort McMurray. And, they're going along, they're just flicking them out, going to work, and then a fire starts in the middle of the highway, because of the grass and everything like that. And then I just don't believe it. It's unbelievable But I just like to give a big thanks to Newfoundland and their workers and the way they go about mitigating fires getting into communities and stuff like that.
I appreciate the time, Rob. Thanks for the call.
Okay, cheers, buddy.
Take good care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, and we're still, again, I cannot speak for mayors of one community or another, but we're still trying to find out what the formal process is at the provincial government level to prepare for wildfire season. There's, and I'll keep saying it until we do get an answer, about the windfall, the fire load. I mean, that's the kindling. That makes the fire that much more intense. And then you talk about fire breaks around communities and those types of things. Preparedness is always a good idea. And, I hate to be talking about people living in fear and worst case scenario, but that's exactly what planning entails, is what happens if this goes wrong. All right, let's get one more on before we get to the news, and appreciate the patience of everyone else in the queue. But let's go to line number 3. Good morning, Molly Nash. You're on the air.
Oh, hi, Patty. How are you?
Excellent today. Thank you. How about you?
Good. Thank you. I was just, I won't take too much of your time, but I just wanted to hop on and let everyone know about our summer 50/50 tickets that are going to be drawn this Friday, June 20th. So they're 3 for $5, and if you want to purchase, you can email me at molly@edfnl.ca or call 722-0500 extension 1. And I also wanted to talk about our bingo that's going to be happening again tonight at Jack Byrne Arena in Torbay. So for our bingo, the doors are going to open at 5:30, and the first game starts at 7. We want to remind everyone to bring your own cardboard as a surface to play on, and that it's $25 to play all games. We're going to have a $1,000 jackpot, and then we're also going to have a food truck on site that's cash only. So I wanted to let everyone know about that, and if you'd like any more information, that you can check it out on our Facebook page at the Eating Disorder Foundation of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Absolutely. So, we try to make sure that the conversation is not simply about the fundraising, but also awareness out there. And this one thing that I keep putting out there because I think it's important is eating disorders don't discriminate. It's not, as people think about it, like a teenage girl issue. It happens to men and women of all ages, and the work that's been done and things that have been achieved by the Eating Disorder Foundation, even something as fundamental as inpatient services at the Health Sciences. So if you are so inclined, and everyone loves a 50/50, who doesn't like a bit of bingo? You can make the eating disorder the home for your hard-earned money.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Eating disorders affect every type of individual, and all proceeds from our fundraisers go to support the programs and services that we offer to the individuals and families who are dealing with an eating disorder in our province.
Appreciate the time this morning. Keep up the good work, Molly. Thanks a lot.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, so we've got a couple of callers in the queue. Amanda wants to talk about the Mount Terrace School. Martha wants to talk about housing. Linda wants to talk about speech-language pathologists. So we'll just get to the news so we can give them the appropriate amount of time. Very quick one. So last night, St. John City Council approved $85,000 to erect a lit sign, like you see in many other cities across the country, just says St. John's. It's going to be in Bannerman Park. Most everywhere else where they have those big lit signs, some are much more publicly exposed. One emailer says, wouldn't that have been an excellent opportunity to put it, say, for instance, on Southside Hills or something like that? Not a bad idea. You'd have to kind of change the size and scope for it to be there. But anywho, let's take a break for the news. When we come back, we're speaking with you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. As I mentioned off the top of the program, this afternoon from 12 to 4, we'll be hosting a radiothon here on the Stingray Radio Network, and that's Mental Health Matters, an opportunity to raise funds for a $1 a Day Foundation. Join us on line number 1, one of the co-founders of a $1 a Day Foundation. That's Alan Doyle. Good morning, Alan. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you doing? Nice to talk to you. Thanks for having us on.
Happy to have you on the show. So big afternoon ahead.
Big afternoon ahead, raising money for all mental health and addictions programs that are located in Newfoundland and Labrador. We're doing raising, thanks to the good folks at VOCM, we're going to put all hands together and raise money for places like Lionel Kellen Hospice in Central Newfoundland and Sunshine Network in Triton and a whole bunch of other ones. So call in if mental health matters to you and you want to make a donation or become a $1 a day or whatever. All the dough goes to stays in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Yeah, so we'll have a bunch of guests and some conversations, in addition to make a donation, which of course is the ultimate goal here this afternoon. Sharing some of your personal stories, putting a face to mental health issues, I think has been very helpful over the recent past.
It sure is, and one of the reasons I sort of dedicated the last decade, basically, of my life to this foundation and this idea is that after years of traveling and looking around, Patty, like I said, you look at things like homelessness, and you look at things like prisons and crime, and I kept thinking to myself, I think these are all symptoms, and the actual problem is mental health and addictions. If we can improve mental health and addictions by 5%, I think we could improve everything else by 25%. And so that's why I decided to dedicate most of my volunteerism over the last decade to this, and it's great to be doing it across the country, and it's great to be doing it in our own backyard here today.
Yeah, like the Sunshine Network out in Green Bay South, that's really focusing on children or young adults. And same thing with the Jacob Potter Memorial Foundation, which is also one of the focus areas this afternoon. We can talk about it across the broad stroke of the community, but so many organizations that are specifically dealing with the young people in this province, young Canadians, has grown exponentially because the need has grown exponentially. We really have to wrap our mind around that.
The need is growing constantly, and the services that are available for people are just not keeping up with the need. And bridging that gap is the whole thing Dollar a Day Foundation does. Is that we go to places like Thrive, for example, in St. John's, and we look at the amazing work that those people are doing, and we help them do it. And that is it. I've visited, I don't know, probably 70 different mental health and addictions facilities in Canada in the last 7 or 8 years, and I'm always so impressed and taken aback, in all honesty, about the incredible work that they do. It's the work that nobody wants to do. Most of us don't, and they're doing it at the worst times and the worst hours. And I always say the same thing when I walk out the door. They're willing and eager to do this stuff, and it all needs to be done. The least we can do is give them $1.
Makes a difference. As they say, every dollar matters. Insofar as the backfill that comes from organizations like the Janeway Foundation, the Healthcare Foundation, the Dollar a Day Foundation, if it wasn't for the volunteerism and the altruism of these organizations, which are raising so much needed funds for these areas, the government would never be able to backfill the lost revenue. So if you are indeed a family that is talking about or dealing with mental health or mental illness inside your own family, take an opportunity to listen in this afternoon. If you have the capacity, please do make a donation. And when we talk about $1 a day, it really is the epitome of the cliche, every dollar matters. So no donation too small, no donation too big. So please make time for the show this afternoon.
Really appreciate all your support, and really appreciate everyone in Newfoundland and Labrador looking in their own backyard and trying to be part of the solution for this stuff.
And one of your co-founders, Brendan Paddock, talking about 1 in 5 Canadians by the time they reach the age of 40 will have a mental health concern. Hard to know what phrase to attach to it. And he also goes on to say that every single day in this country, some 500,000 people are absent from work because of a mental health issue and or an addiction. So the work is critically important. So my plea to you is that you join us this afternoon and do what you can. Anything else that you'd like to talk about this morning, Alan?
Oh, I'm just grateful for the opportunity to help these places that are doing all the hard work. And I've been saying from day one, I started this whole thing with Brendan and Andrew and stuff, with really just as a way to help people that needed help on the street. And as it's developed, it's grown into this thing. I really want to help the people who are helping the people on the street. And you go to the places that we're supporting, and you very quickly realize you don't want them stopping doing what they're doing to go raise money. We want to be able to do it for them,
Yeah, and I'll just make one more quick mention, the Jacob Potter Memorial Foundation. They deal with young people up to the age of 35, I believe it is. And at one point there, a couple of years ago, they had to stop taking names on the wait list. So that's a clear example of just how big the demand is. And so we're all going to try to play an active role this afternoon. And we talk about things like May's Mental Health Month or what have you, but the real conversation needs to be extended to 365. Telling the stories, personal and or someone belong to you, is part of that breaking down the stigma, which still persists, and maybe specifically when we talk about men and the rates of suicide and the like. So let's be open and honest. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. If you broke your leg, you wouldn't be embarrassed to wear a cast. If you get a diagnosis regarding mental illness, we have to talk about it, treat it, and have the public discourse the very same way. No one's embarrassed because they broke their leg. So let's not have that stigma associated with mental health as well. Alan, appreciate the time this morning. Thanks for the good work that you're doing, and maybe I'll see you this afternoon if you're around.
Great day, Heather. Thanks so much for everything.
Anytime, Alan. All the best.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. The conversations just can't be frequent enough, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 4. Good morning, Amanda. You're on the air.
Hi, Patty. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. How about you?
Good. I'm calling about the school that is going to be started, I guess, yesterday in Kenmount Terrace. I was one of the parents that was there for that announcement yesterday, and there's a group of us that have been advocating since spring last year, and I think all of my counterparts have called in and expressed their concerns. We did send a list of questions to Minister Studley in an email yesterday morning, and unfortunately we didn't get a chance to stay around because we had work commitments. But as a group, we still have big concerns about the school, the configuration of the school zone, and what is happening, especially in Larrysbrook and Lark Hall currently. And we don't feel that many of our concerns have been addressed or heard. So I'm just calling in to kind of discuss those.
Okay, so where do we want to start? Are we talking about what the current state of affairs is at Lark Hall and Larrysbrook, or?
Yeah, the current state at both schools is what's affecting, I have 3 kids. So I have 2 at Lark Hall, one that'll be going to Larrysbrook in 2 years, and I have a daughter that's going to be part of that largest kindergarten class in Lark Hall in 2026. So right now, the current configuration, there's 1,000 students between those 2 schools, and that's going to continue to increase with the development of Kenmount Terrace. We are like a small community within the city with what I believe is the largest catchment zone within the city, and it continues to grow, and we have no space in those schools to continue to grow. And I know St. Andrews is involved in it, but I'm unfamiliar with that school. So right now at Larrysbrook, what's being proposed is putting 45 kids in a classroom with 2 teachers, same grade, but just basically doubling up, because we were told the cafeteria and the library would be taken away. And so now we're being told the cafeteria isn't going to be taken away, but now you're going to put 45 kids in one classroom that can't hold the 30 kids that's currently in that classroom. So we're being told 2 different stories by the schools, and it's very hard to figure out what is actually happening in our zone and what's happening to our kids within those schools. Our kids are coming home and telling us the school's too hot in the winter, in the summer, in spring. They got to wear T-shirts and shorts because the upstairs classrooms are too hot. The downstairs classrooms are too cold. There's no green space at Larrysbrook. They're going to put in a speed camera to make it safer, but it doesn't solve the problem that these kids at lunchtime, if you don't give them permission to go to the mall, they are in front of screens. And research shows that increased screen time is devastating to kids. Outdoor play is what they need for, and you were just speaking to Alan Doyle about mental health. Mental health starts at a very early age, and lots of these kids have ADHD or neurodivergent, have mental health issues. And when you cram a kid, like my son, with ADHD in a class with 45 other kids, there's overstimulation. There's inability to learn. And our education system, I believe I discussed it with you last year, is failing these kids, because if you cram 1,000 kids into a building that can physically hold 600, but the educational capacity is 1,000, these kids are going to not learn. There's going to be increased absenteeism. There's going to be increased violence. Kids are not going to want to go to school. They're not going to be in a very supportive learning environment because the staff are going to be stretched. So there's a whole boatload of issues currently in these two schools. The furnace backfired. The St. John's Regional Fire Department did respond to a call to that school on the May long weekend. It was Monday evening. There was no contact for NL schools. So when the custodian went in on Tuesday morning, that's who discovered the fumes and the smells. The air quality was subpar. Kids didn't go to school. They were picked up early. My kids came home with headaches and their eyes hurt. So the air quality may have been good enough to open school, but kids have been in school. Like, there's so many issues. Yes, it could have been a furnace issue, but that building is old. So I'm just at a loss. I'm so appreciative of a new school. But when you're putting kindergartens to grade 7, like you said previously to Minister Studley, is there going to be a separate entrance for the 3 and 4-year-olds that are in pre-K or kindergarten versus the 13, 14-year-olds that are in grade 7? Like, how is this going to work? And if you got 860 kindergartners to grade 7, but we already have 1,000 currently, I don't understand why our grade 8s are being pushed into PWC without consulting the parents, reconfiguring the zone again for however many times it's been. I don't know why they can't reconfigure the zones around us to accommodate some students to other zones. Why is it our zone that's constantly reconfigured with a community that is growing exponentially?
Yeah, some of it's geographical, but I mean, we talk about maybe using Cowan Heights, Rennie's River, St. Teresa's as part of the possible reconfiguration to ease the capacity issues at Learisbrook and Larkhall. Not a bad idea. I don't know how complicated that might be, in the world of getting the kids to school. I'm sure we can figure it out. I mean, we've got school buses and people have cars and the like, so I know it's not as simple as that, but it's not as complicated as some make it out to be. Amanda, I'll give you the final thoughts before I have to get going.
Yeah, I'm appreciative of the school. I just would love to invite Terry Hall from NL Schools to speak on this matter, because it seems like they're going by paper and they're not actually going by what's actually happening on paper, and in person are two different things. So I would invite Terry Hall and the ministers to walk through with the parents and maybe call into you and discuss exactly what the plan is for the current conditions of these schools. Yeah,
we're trying to get Mr. Hall on as soon as possible. Absolutely. And I appreciate you making time this morning, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Patty. I appreciate it.
Anytime. All the best.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye. Let's take a break. We'll get back to Linda's next and talk about speech language pathologists, and then we're speaking with you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let us go. Line number 2. Good morning, Linda. You're on the air.
Oh, hi, Patty. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm calling in about the speech language pathology services.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to lend my voice to the concerns regarding the lack of service delivery and the lack of a strategy and the barriers for allied health, and obviously speech language is what's in the news recently. I just want to speak a little bit about myself so you'll know where I'm coming from and your listeners will know where I'm coming from. I'm a retired occupational therapist, so I no longer work in the Newfoundland system, so I can pretty much say what I think at this point. And I have worked in four Canadian provinces and 3 U.S. states, so I worked through a whole host of different organizational management structures. And I find the complacency for service delivery in Newfoundland, I have never seen anything like it. All these disciplines have significant waiting lists. There doesn't seem to be any plan. The World Health Organization, I've heard you talk about this, talked about a third of the population will require rehabilitation services in their lifetime. And I don't think we even have a decent strategy in this province. And I'm not talking about the frontline staff. The frontline clinical staff, as you know, because I've heard you talk about it, are trained primarily outside the province. And, most of them are trained at a master's level at this point in time. They're writing national exams. They're coming out of the top universities in the country. And we have an organizational and a management structure that cannot seem to get organized around the service delivery. So I find that really, really troubling. And I don't know if anybody from the Department of Health has been on or the Department of Education, if they've even responded to any of the calls that have been in?
Not yet. When you talk about the managerial structural breakdown or shortcomings, specifically what are you referring to?
So Newfoundland, now I'm out of the system, bear that in mind. Newfoundland went with the program management structure. Department of Health could tell you 20 or 25 years ago, I was here at the time, and actually that's around the time that I left the province, because I remember being really chaotic, and I remember thinking, oh, this is a good time to go away, and I had gone away, and then of course, life happens, and I ended up staying away. So I've worked half my career in the US and half my career in Canada, right? So the structure here is a program management structure. So I don't know how to describe it, but I'll use my words. There's what I call a generic management structure. So basically these staff report to anybody of any background. So you're reporting to somebody who doesn't really understand the scope of practice. So when the Department of Health talks about working to the top of your scope of practice, I think, well, how are they going to do that when they can't identify the scope of practice? So you're reporting into general managers. In the high-performing systems, I'm not aware of anywhere that has this structure that we have in Newfoundland. So do you understand? It's like a general, like I could report to you. You could be hired, and I could report as an occupational therapist to you, right? So then if we wanted to make program changes, then we have to, there's a lot of legwork to explain to somebody who has a general knowledge what's involved. So it slows everything down, is what it does. And then everything is going through multiple levels of management to get approved, if it gets approved. So there's...
Yeah, and then we talk about reapprovals and stuff and things that are generally rubber stamped or greenlit automatically. And we've just got all this unnecessary bureaucracy, and that's through various levels of government. And here's a couple of disconnects for me. Is NL Health Services says there's 5 job postings out there and no one's applying. But at the exact same time, we've heard from speech language pathologists themselves saying that they can't get a job with the public sector. Which is it? Because it cannot be both. They also go on to say that one of the job postings...
I think some of them might be, I don't know. You'd have to ask the speech therapist. They would know more. But they're probably in, like I'm in St. John's, right? So I'm not applying for a job in St. Anthony. So maybe the jobs are in St. Anthony or Goose Bay. I don't know where the jobs are. Yeah. But they're not really where I'm living, right? So that's part of it. And then the other thing that, this is my personal opinion, this is not reflective of anybody else's. I find there's a very rigid human resource strategy. So they're posting the jobs, and people would be, like, there's a lot of retirees at this point. There's a lot of us going out of the system, and I don't think there's a big plan for that either. But there's a lot of us that would work part-time, in our first or second or third year when we were retired. And I would be prepared to go, and I have gone outside the area that I've worked in for them several times, right, to help with the waiting list. But that's not really integrated into the system. There's no central office to put out a call to say, is anybody prepared to go to, I don't know, I'll pick, like, say, Notre Dame Bay or somewhere like that they had a waiting list. So there's nobody organizing any of that to my knowledge. Now, I'm sure they'll tell you that there is, but I never saw much evidence of it when I worked.
Yeah, centralized wait lists.
So the waiting lists are there month to month to month to month to year, and there's no plan.
I mean, we're even talking about the benefits of a centralised wait list insofar as things like surgeries go, which just makes sense. Same thing for this one. Even if there was a formal locum opportunity, and that might not be ideal because you need that continuity of care when you're in therapy for whatever it might be. But, and again, another one where it seems that we've just kind of lost focus here is if we're talking about the staffing levels of speech language pathologists in the school system, the number hasn't changed in 30 years. Like, how could that be?
I think there's no accountability. Like, who's responsible for that? There has to be somebody. And, can somebody answer that question for us? Because I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me either. And I will tell you, I worked in the U.S., and this is what I always admired them for this. When I first went to work there, I sat next to a physiotherapist in one of the staff meetings, and she had finished full-time work. And she sat next to me, and she said to me, I've committed to 6 months. I'm going to work 3 days a week, and I'm going to cover that. It was an area that was outside the central area, so it was difficult to cover, and it was a lot of travel time for the full-time staff. And she worked there for 4 years, 3 days a week, for an extra 4 years part-time. And that is what manages the waiting list. Like, Newfoundland system has no elasticity in it. So what happens is, say, if I'm working in a program, I'm the only person in the program as a therapist. So there's no coverage when I go on vacation. There's no coverage if I get sick, say, for more than a day. But say if I was off for, 6 weeks if I had a surgery, or if I had a car accident and I was off for a couple of months. There's no plan for coverage. There's no discussion of any coverage. It's really poor. The human resources are really poorly managed here in comparison to other places I've worked.
Well, on that front,
and I do think it's that management structure.
Even with the government's recent announcement of their 10-year human resources plan, which some people worry about the veracity of the data insofar as inputs go, in the next wave, the speech-language pathologists are not even part of that plan. So I think that speaks volumes as to the understanding government may or may not have regarding the need for more in the public sector in particular. So anyway, the stories that continue to flow into
my understanding, now I could be wrong on this, and this would have to be confirmed, but somebody told me that the dietitians were not included in that either. Now, I have to say, I find it really troubling that they were missed in that report, but I'm not surprised, because a lot of those reports, there's a lot of errors in them. And it seems like they can't be comprehensive. I don't know what that is, because when I graduated, they had the skills, the managers had the skills in the system to be really comprehensive and take a really broad view of what was required. Mm-hmm. And so whatever has happened in the past 20, and I've been out of the province for 15 years, so I missed a whole, I guess, decade and a half of what was going on. But I find that it's more narrow in their thinking. It's like they can't take a comprehensive look towards service delivery. So it's more of a bits and pieces service delivery. Because people need different services. Like rehab often, if you look at the core rehab disciplines, you're looking at occupational therapy, which I am one, physiotherapy, and speech-language pathology. And there's no strategy for that. Really has to go together often in a coordinated fashion. But what you'll find here is there might be an OT. There's obviously they haven't increased in speech in decades. And, there might not be a PT. So you're really limited in your outcomes, and there's nowhere to send. And I worked in the system, and we've tried to send things forward, and we sent in emails, and we've sent in reports, and we've had meetings, and nothing changes.
Yeah. And again, as much as we hear between getting an assessment and then maybe waiting upwards of 2 years to get the therapy, what gets lost there, especially if we're talking about children very close to entering school. So it's a much bigger conversation. It would be, just like everything else in this world, it'd be nice to be able to understand and to track the successes or failures of children who have been in the school system, who are not getting this level of treatment, compare and contrast to other jurisdictions where they might be doing a better job and have lower ratios for the therapists to have to see in schools. We've heard from one, and she wanted me to keep her name out of it. She's assigned to 5 schools, and in some of the schools has as many as 35, 40 children that she's supposed to help. It can't be done. There's not enough hours in the day. There's just one person can only accomplish so much. Anything else before we say goodbye this morning, Linda?
I do want to illustrate that. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. I have a grandson who is thankfully not in Newfoundland, who had a significant speech delay between the ages of 2 and 3. And he, because of where he lives, he was able to get speech-language pathology services. He's finishing kindergarten. He's in school. He's thriving. He gets the bus to and from school with his sister, and he's doing really well in school. And I think and the speech therapist can speak to this better, but one of the concerns that in the family at the time, because he couldn't articulate anything, so his wants and his needs, he couldn't really communicate that until he saw the speech therapist. And there was a lot of concerns, was he going to be cognitively delayed? But what it ended up happening when the speech therapist came in and assessed him, he's above average in all those areas. It was just a communication in terms of communicating his needs. So this kid is really thriving, and he's not in Newfoundland, so he was able to get services. And they have, and I know people feel differently about early intervention, but I don't think early intervention is the same a lot of places anyway. Like, people use these terms, but they're not standardized in terms of early intervention is obviously different in Newfoundland than it would be where this kid is getting services.
I appreciate your time this morning.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Stay in touch.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Very quickly before we get to the break, so this is a message coming out from surrounding areas surrounding Badger. So apparently, this comes from a firefighter in Grand Falls, Windsor. Traffic congestion is backing up onto the highway in Badger and is impeding potential emergency response efforts. People are told to not go through Badger. Let's take a break. When we come back, Joe Lafitte is in the queue, the president of the Retired Teachers Association of Newfoundland and Labrador. Some big changes come to their group insurance plan coming up very shortly. And then Debbie's here to talk about PTSD Awareness Month. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 4. Say good morning to the president of the Retired Teachers Association of Newfoundland and Labrador. That's Joe Lafitte. And good morning, Joe. You're on the air.
Hey, good morning, Patty. Thanks for taking my call.
Happy to do it. So some big changes coming that some retired teachers might not be aware of. What's happening?
Yes, well, due to increased pressures on the plan from the expensive prescription drugs, the group insurance managers had decided, because we're a teacher-owned plan, basically we own our own group insurance plan when it comes to drugs and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, they've basically gone from a plan that since 1992, members only had to pay the dispensing fee or pharmacy markup for their drugs. So most members probably are totally unaware of the actual cost that the drugs are. And right now on July 1st, the plan is introducing a 15% copay. Now, a lot of plans have a 20% copay, like the federal government, the federal service, the provincial government, the pension, plans as well have a 20-80-20. We're going with an 85-15, so the member is going to be responsible now for 15% of the total cost of that prescription. So for someone walking into the pharmacy on July 1st and thinking that they're only going to pay their $7 or $8 or $12 per prescription, it can be quite a shock if they haven't been aware and following the news and reading the information that's been sent out.
Yeah, because as you pointed out in an email that you sent me, some people maybe just didn't even read it. Some people may have moved and never got the mail in the first place. So I'm sure some are going to be unfortunately informed here this morning. So how comprehensive is the plan for pharmaceutical coverage? Because we see, it depends on the type. It is, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, our plan, if the drug has a DIN number, I guess an identification number that's approved by the Pharmaceutical Association or allowed to be issued or prescribed in Newfoundland and Labrador, our plan pretty much covers that drug, and that includes from very expensive cancer drugs, life-saving drugs, and it also includes the ones that are heavily marketed now and people are asking, like the ones that are weight loss, drugs, the semaglutides, the prescriptions that you see, Ozempic and different, just ask for it, those kind of ones. They're heavily marketed, and they do have, obviously, for some people that they don't care about the side effects. They just see that, I can lose weight. Now, at the same time, they are prescribed for diabetics and people who are, I guess, on that spectrum that need to lose weight for life-threatening, illnesses that they might have, right? So.
Yeah, and Ozempic and Wegovy is one that we see in Canada.
Yeah.
And there's many drugs that have off-label uses, but we do hear about shortages for people who are actual diabetics regarding their access to Ozempic and Wegovy and the like. So that's a good thing. And this is not about insurance, Joe, but how long have you been retired?
I'm currently going into 10 years, Patty.
So when you hear all the stories that you hear about education and some of the concerns people have, and maybe the rise in violence and the class sizes and the way classes are composed, any thoughts on what you hear regarding educational matters today?
It's concerning, Patty. I've seen a lot of it in my last 10 years of teaching. That puts it back 20 years now. And the thing, I know... circumstances. I went back substitute a few days for a couple of years back, and really not a lot has changed. At least not for the better, not from what I've seen. I know more bodies into the classroom. Class sizes are always a key factor in all of these things, and the special needs of the kids and the types of needs that we seem to be facing in the classrooms has gone up, dramatically in the past number of years, right? It seems, anyway.
Well, absolutely. Class composition and class size are probably two of the key concerns people talk about. And, you talk about academic outcomes. So. And so much of this has a direct impact on academic outcomes. Chronic absenteeism, violence in the schools, class size, class composition. But the trends, you talk about 20 years, the trends since 2003 have been heading in the wrong direction regarding academic outcomes here. I don't know what we do to stem that tide, but unless we start with those two key factors, size and composition, we're going to struggle mightily.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. As I say, but I really appreciate you taking the time for me to at least pass along to any members of the NLTA group insurance plan that, come July 1st, there is a copay in effect on any prescription drug, when they go to get those filled, and be prepared. Depending on what drugs you are, your amount you're going to be paying is a lot more than what you've been used to, unfortunately.
Yeah, so July 1st, get ready, folks. 15% copay. Appreciate the time, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the call, and thanks so much.
My pleasure. All the best. Bye-bye. It's Joe Lafitte, the president of the Retired Teachers Association. Let's get to the break. So, Peter Hanlon, Derek Clancy, Rob Maloney, and Ryan Clough, Assistant General Manager down in San Jose. So 4 people from the province executive level at the National Hockey League. And of course, I focused in on Hanlon and Clancy because I just thought it was fascinating that 2 guys that went to St. Pat's and are now assistant GMs. Anyway, let's take a break. When we come back, Debbie, you're next to talk about PTSD. Don't go away. Welcome back. Let's go to line number 3. Good morning, Debbie Sampson. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. Thank you. I would like to say a great thank you to VOCM and Alan Doyle. I heard the conversation about raising money, and it's so needed, and also raising the awareness. So thank you for that. So I think it's a good way to chime in, because you had said the conversations regarding mental health can't be frequent enough. So this being PTSD Awareness Month, I want to talk a little bit about that. I have complex PTSD, and complex PTSD is not listed as a separate diagnosis from PTSD in the DSM-5, but I hope that someday they will, or some way to distinguish it, because PTSD occurs when a person has been witness to let's just say a shooting, okay? So it's just one separate event, or it may be a veteran who has come back from war, so it's one separate event. But for myself, I have complex PTSD, or I should say I had, because I've cured it, so I'm going to talk a bit about that. I have complex PTSD, which started in my childhood because I was abused as a child, and right on up through my life with workplace harassment, which really is workplace abuse, and relationships, and, whole gamut. So a lifetime of abuse. And 13 years ago, I developed complex post-traumatic stress disorder. There's many symptoms under complex post-traumatic stress disorder. There's depression and anxiety, and there's flashbacks, and there's nightmares, and there's a fear of going to sleep, and the list goes on and on and on. The one specific one that I want to talk about today is something called PNES, which is psychogenic non-epileptic seizures. And I'm a counselor. I was a counselor for 25 years in Labrador City, and then I became disabled with complex PTSD for 13 years. So after, it was about 6 years ago, I guess, I developed shaking. And if anyone has ever seen the Exorcist movie, when they do the exorcism, this is what happened to me. And I was on a phone call talking to my daughter about an incident that happened in my life. My father was killed in a car accident, so it was a very traumatic incident. And I've had many piled on top of that one incident. So when I started talking about that, I went into shaking, screaming, and tingling, and I talk in tongues. It gets so bizarre. And I mean, people who have PNES are not as extreme as me. I think I'm at the end of the spectrum somewhere. Anyway, that started, and it didn't continue. And it went on for from 2016 until 18 months ago when I cured myself. And they lasted for 45 minutes to 5 hours. and I was taken to ambulance. I was admitted to the psychiatric ward. I saw psychiatrist after psychiatrist. One psychiatrist kicked me out of his office because I wouldn't stop shaking because he was talking about my trauma. But what was happening, and I've done a lot of research, I had to diagnose myself. I took my diagnosis to my psychiatrist. He's an amazing psychiatrist, Dr. Walsh. He's just one of the best. He was not aware of PNES. He accepted what I said. He went and did his own research, and he then started, learning about it. So now he's able to help others. I really want to shout this out because I wrote a book. I've written 2 books, one about my life of abuse, and the second one about the way that I've cured the illness and the trauma that I've endured. And I've cured it with using psychedelic cannabis, in particular, psychedelics and psychedelic cannabis over the past 2.5 years. So Dr. Walsh realized that, yes, this is real, this is what it is, and I'm hoping someday there will be, the people that are in medical school will learn about it. However, I talked to a young nurse who just graduated from school this year as a nurse, and she's working her first job. And I was explaining to her mom what I'm doing. I've set up a place on the west coast of Newfoundland and Labrador. I'm going to go a little bit ahead of myself. I was explaining what I'm doing here because I lobbied the government to try to get them to bring psychedelic cannabis into this province to help people. After seeing the disability that I had for 13 years, and I've now gone back to school, started my own business. I can read books. I have these symptoms are all gone. I'm not depressed. I'm not anxious. It's a cure, not for everybody, but it's a cure for many of us that suffer from this illness. So the government, I wrote letters. I've talked on VOCM before. I can't wait. I'll soon be 67 years old, so I don't have time to wait for the government to do something. So I took it upon myself, invested my own money, and went back to school. And I'm now trained as a psychedelic cannabis therapist. I've set up a place at my own property on the West Coast. I don't want people to have to come and pay me. I wish I could take everybody for free because, I just want to heal people. But I've invested my own RRSPs into this. So I wish the government would get on board, do research. We're too slow. This province is too slow in getting on board. I'm doing my training from Boulder, Colorado. They're on board with so much. Come on, bring it to this province. And now I'm going to go back to the seizures. And I just want to say that I talked to a young nurse just last week, and she's starting her first job. And after explaining to her mom what I'm doing on the West Coast, I looked at her and I said, do you understand what I'm saying about these seizures and all I'm talking about? She said, no. And I said, you just graduated and you don't know what PNES is. And since writing my book and since bringing people here who are healing, I have discovered many others who not necessarily have the extreme symptoms of PNES, the psychogenic non-epileptic seizures that I had, but they start shaking. And I'm just going to give you one example. A young woman that I've been treating, her son took his life in St. John's on August the 11th last year, and I've been working with her, and she's okay with me to talk about her. She called me one night, and she said, Debbie, I'm shaking. I don't know what to do. We talked it through, and I said to her, I am so glad, I never thought I'd ever say today, I am so glad I have PNES, or I had PNES, because I now understand what's happening with you. So there's many people out there that are shaking, and it may just be shaking, and they don't know what it is. They can't get a diagnosis. Or they may have gone and had tests done to see if their seizures are epileptic or they're PNES, but there is a way to heal it. So this woman that I talked to, there's been many others who've read my book and called me and said, oh my God, that's what I have. And so this woman, she said to me, if I had went to the hospital, because she was getting extreme that night, she said they would have given me a pill. They wouldn't have known what was wrong with me. I would have been on a whole bunch of pills. I would have been admitted. I would have been going crazy. But she's doing psychedelic cannabis treatment. It works. She's healing. And that's my story. Oh, there's a lot more, Patty, but I think... Right.
I want to jump in for a second, Debbie. What I will always throw this caveat out there. Any discussion that we have on this program about treatments for anything, you have to have that conversation with your doctor. It's not me. I actively have to put that out there. And in broader terms, Health Canada needs to speed up their act a little bit on these types of what people might refer to as alternative treatments. There was a story in the media last week about a gentleman, former military veteran, or a military veteran, talk about using ketamine. And he goes to the mainland to get it IV as opposed to the nasal spray that's offered at the clinic here. And, again, I've said this to you in the past, and I think it's important to put it back out there. When we talk about things like psychedelic cannabis or ketamine or anything like that, we're talking about clinical application. We're not talking about buying it on the street, using it before you go to the bar. Absolutely. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about actual clinical work that can and should be done and needs to be better understood by health authorities like Health Canada. Did I hear you mention DSM right off the top here?
Yes, I did, because this is PTSD Awareness Month, and PTSD is the diagnosis that's in the DSM. But I have complex PTSD.
Understood.
I haven't been in that circle, but I do understand that there's been a lot of discussion and debate about whether or not to put a separate diagnosis. So that's what I mentioned about the DSM.
Yeah, DSM is basically something that's published by the American Psychiatric Association, I'm pretty sure, and it's the diagnostic. It's the manual of mental disorders, anyway. I can't remember every word in it, but that does indeed include PTSD, but not PNES, as you point out. Very quickly, just quick thought from you, because I'm going to be late for the news. I hear in some corners people aren't using PTSD any longer. They're just calling it post-traumatic stress, because when you use the word disorder, it kind of says there's something wrong with you as opposed to the fact you've been injured.
I love it.
It's just sort of an interesting way to think about it, because it is an injury. That can happen from a variety of root causes. Debbie, I'm glad you're doing well. I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patty. Have a great day.
Same to you. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break for the news. When we come back, still a huge segment left for you. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number one. Say good morning to the PC member for Grand Falls, Windsor, Buckins. He's also the opposition critic for emergency services. That's Chris Tibbs. And good morning, Chris. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. Thank you for taking my call. And we're just calling today about the situation in Badger right now. We got a lot of support out there. The provincial emergency operations are on site and enacted. Lots of leadership on the go here. Mayor Dennis Butt, myself, and him have been on the go here since this morning. We're looking at some unfavorable, weather conditions later on this afternoon with gusts of 65 kilometers an hour, which is not going to help us at this time. I just came down to Grand Falls, Windsor to grab some more equipment, but headed back up there now. But we have a lot of things in place. The Badger Fire Department, of course, second to none. They've done a fantastic job up there informing residents with the evacuation alert. And I just want to make sure that everybody knows that it is a standby situation, evacuation alert. And more information will be provided as the day goes on. But I just want to remind everybody, Patty, to have everything ready in case an evacuation order is going to be put in place. And that can go for any town or any community across this province, across this country. We need to ensure that you keep stuff like medications that you may need, any very important essential documents you may have. But you should always have a bag, and this goes for anybody in the future. Have a bag with a list of things that you may need to leave in 10 to 15 minutes. And that's going to help out the people of Badger today, if needed, or anybody else across the province.
Absolutely. And we're, like I told Mayor Butt, we're available to share any information that he has here on the program, or I'm sure the newsroom will be more than happy as well. So just a quick question on wildfire preparedness. I don't know if you know the answer to this one, but does the government, whether it be this government or the PC government of the past, is there formal strategies in place for, identifying real problematic areas, clearing the windfall or the fire load and the fire break priorities for different communities? Is anything like that formally in place? Do you know?
Yes, I would assume so, Patty. I've seen it in the past, sort of thing, and it's an ongoing. It's a breathing plan as we move into our forest firefighting season. But you also look at things to be prepared around the province itself. People are on top of this. Like I say, the Provincial Emergency Operations Act, we do have people here on the ground, that are taking care of this today. But make no mistake, as as climate change happens, as we get much drier winter seasons, much hotter summer seasons, we're going to be seeing a lot more of these sort of situations. So, the money and the resources that we put into firefighting for the province here, it's essential, and we want to make sure we have every water bomber available. I know different provinces help each other out, but within 3 kilometers of Badger, we really want to get a handle on this thing today and get it out as soon as possible.
100%. Chris, anything else before we take another call?
No, but just please, I ask everybody to remain calm, remain vigilant, and make sure that you check out any social media. All the information is out there. There's going to be tons of information out there. Just make sure we're getting it from credible sources. And I thank the OCM for their commitment to getting that information out to Patty. So let's make sure everybody in Badger stay safe, remain calm, and we will keep you updated throughout the day.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Patty. So
You're welcome. Bye-bye. It's Chris Tibbs, PC member for Grand Falls, Windsor, Buckins. Let's see here. Let's go to line number 2. Paul, you're on the air. Hi, Paul. Paul on line number 2?
Yes, sir. Sorry about that.
No problem. What's on your mind?
Oh, I'm on the air. I didn't know, Patty, I was on the air, me buddy. I'm sorry.
No problem. Go right ahead.
No, sorry, me buddy. Patty, I just wanted to call in about those idiots that park on the fire lanes there in front of the malls and whatnot and handicap zones. Patty, this morning I had an incident there. I was over by Sobeys there, Topsail Road. I got off the bus there on Hamlin Road, and I noticed a guy there parked right in the fire lane. And I just said, "You're parked in the fire lane." And of course, you know what his response to me was? He just told me where to go. So I responded in kind. I went into Sobeys, and I was talking to the manager there, and I mentioned it to her, but she told me they do go out and ask people to move their vehicles, but of course they get the same response. They actually tell the manager herself told me they actually curse at her. And they try to call the city about these people, and the city doesn't respond. I guess the traffic division, they don't come in. So that's kind of an odd situation there, Patty. They're just too lazy, Patty, to park a couple of aisles over, a couple of parking lots over. They'll stay in their car and. But that was it this morning. That kind of got me on the go there this morning. Anytime I see somebody doing something like that, I should keep my mouth shut, I suppose, Patty, because there's no difference, is it? They do what they want, right?
By the look of it, yes. Look, I cannot believe how many times, like when I go to the grocery store that I go to the most, every single time there'll be a collection of vehicles in the fire lane. It's very clearly indicated that it's a fire lane. So if you're driving a 2019 Honda Civic, that's not a fire truck. So maybe you can park it somewhere else. And there was one instance, I don't know, let's say a few weeks ago. Fella out in front of the grocery store, like right in front of the doors, with the diesel truck running, and you could smell the diesel all the way through the produce section, and nobody did anything about it. I haven't got the brain power to get into any fire lane altercation. It's just not worth my time. But
it's a waste of time.
You could smell it right into the produce section, and nobody went out and asked them to move. It's remarkable. And how oblivious are you? What lack of self-awareness to do the like. So, folks, the fire lane is there for a reason. I've heard somebody say, who I know is a frequent parker in fire lanes, he says, well, if the fire alarm goes off, I'll just move. That's not really the point. It's that way for a reason.
That's what I was told too, Pat. Actually, that's what the manager told me.
Yeah.
She actually said to me, I think she said legally they can do that, and if there was the fire department come, they would just drive their vehicle out of the way. But to me, parked is parked, no matter, because they'll park there in front of the stores and their wives will go in for 10, 15 minutes, Yeah. They shouldn't be there at all. And the city doesn't even respond. So when they call the city for help, the traffic division, I guess, they don't show up. So what more can anybody do? I guess nothing. I guess everybody should park there, Patty.
Yeah, I roll my eyes at it. Another one is people who park in, whether it be the spots for pregnant women or the handicap spots. Now one thing we need to be mindful of in the blue zones is you might not look like you have a mobility issue, but you may indeed have something that a doctor has considered serious enough that you get a handicap sticker or a placard or whatever the right word is. So we have to be careful about judging those folks.
That's fair enough. But these other idiots that, it just ticks you off, right? Well, like I say, it's probably just best to not say nothing at all. Because you don't expect, it happened there about a month ago. I did the same thing. There were 2 cars parked there in front of Sobeys right by the door, and I mentioned it to them. And one car moved, but the other guy stayed there. It's just, why can't he just move a couple of feet down? Parked it, it just doesn't make sense, Patty. I don't know. And like I say, if the police were to come by, now years ago I did work in retail, Paddy, and one time I don't know what you call them, traffic division from the city, I don't know what you call those people.
Bylaw officers, I guess.
Yeah, they came by and they just told Buddy to move on. They never gave him a ticket. They said, "You're still in the car, just move on." So I guess it is legal to park there and stay in the car.
Yeah, and it is. And again, I choose just not to get involved. But I do recall, it just popped in my head, this is certainly a decade or more ago now, I saw a guy give a firefighter the finger when I guess the fireman was, there to pick up some grub for the fire hall. And I imagine that's what he was saying, to say, it's a fire lane. But he just gave the firefighter the finger. I just remember that. That was, you just got to roll your eyes. Anyway, that's it.
When I was in there in shopping this morning, actually the fire department were in there as well. The big truck was there, parked farther down on the lot.
Yeah.
And I said,
hello?
Well, he probably wouldn't anyway, right?
Yeah.
But
Paul, I appreciate the time.
Okay, my buddy. I just, it's just frustrating, Penny. That's all.
Yeah, I appreciate your call. Thank you.
Okay, bud. Thanks. Bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to speak with the president at the FFAW. That's Dwan Street. I think we're talking about the amount of unprocessed crab that's leaving the province, and I believe she also recently met with the minister responsible. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 7 and say good morning to the president at the FFAW. That is Dwan Street. Dwan, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Good morning to you.
Great show again today, as per usual.
Thank you very much. Welcome back.
Thanks. I know it's been a few weeks since we spoke. We've been quiet. ASP has been quiet. I'm guessing that's for two very different reasons. I will say OCI, the Sullivans at OCI, were the only company that demonstrated clearly they had more balls and brains and put out a statement to try and justify the practice of shipping crab out without putting it through their plants. I'm not sure if you saw that statement, Patty, but it's pretty laughable to say in a statement that you've shipped out small amounts during peak production because it was overflow, and then continue to say, but we're so good to our workers that we're also shipping crab in to make sure that they have work. So, if you have overflow, why are you shipping crab out, right? It's contradiction. It makes no sense. That's the type of foolishness we've come to expect from these guys. But, we've been quiet because we've been busy. Shortly after I spoke to you a couple of weeks ago, I was contacted by a buyer in the Maritimes with significant concerns of the bullying and intimidation that's happening up there, pressure that he says he's never seen in the crab industry, and it's coming from Newfoundland and Labrador. I've been provided emails in black and white from a company in the Maritimes who was working with a processor here in Newfoundland and Labrador, and working quite well, great working relationship, who all of a sudden says, I can't do this anymore. I'm getting threats. I'm getting angry calls, intimidation from members of ASP. So we have to break off this relationship. I did make one error when I spoke to you a few weeks ago and said that there had been some shady deal cut with the Nova Scotia Seafood Alliance. And I'll apologize to the Seafood Alliance for that. That deal doesn't exist, but the deal does exist with A-Stands. And I have the details of that. So, we've been busy getting our ducks in a row on this one. I'm sure ASP thought that we were just going to be quiet and let this go by the wayside and let it go away, but it's not. We met with the Premier. We met with Minister Dempster. We laid out our concerns and what's happening here. John Efford and Glenn Winslow attended with me as well as one of my colleagues, Crystal Ann Gorman, and we were very clear on what's happening here when it comes to anti-competitive behavior, price stifling, collusion, and I think they got it. They did make a commitment to follow up. We've sent a letter to the Premier and the Minister asking for commitments. First of all, on Minister Burns' previously announced, 9 out of 10-point plan, some form of accountability and provincial price monitoring, so these guys can't get away with this, that we don't have questions that they're cooking the books and they're misreporting, that the province has a role to play here, and also to implement the oversight committee that was promised when the push for free enterprise was on. And of course, that committee would consist of harvesters, plant workers, and government officials. And they would keep an eye on the numbers and catch something like, if the numbers are not quite adding up. We also met with Tony Wakeham and Craig Party with the opposition, and I thanked them for that. I think it was a very productive conversation. They were very concerned, and as a thank you gift, we left them with some very interesting listening material that I'm sure they've enjoyed. So right now we're just, we followed up with the provincial government asking for another meeting. And we, unfortunately, it's a bit disappointing. We haven't gotten a response yet. We did send another letter and a request yesterday, and we're hoping to hear something soon.
Okay, a couple of quick questions here. So the way I read the OCI release, and maybe I misinterpreted it, is when they were over capacity, ship some out, and when they weren't at capacity, ship some in. Is that not how it read?
No, that's not quite how it read. It was a whole lot of words, but not a lot of defense and not a lot of logic. And I think the Sullivans need to be a little bit careful and might forget where I'm from, because, my hometown has a pretty big OCI plant. And when I'm talking to folks and I hear, oh, no work again this weekend, oh, only one shift running today, that kind of stands out to me, and I kind of keep that information in the back of my mind. Now, I will say, strangely enough, since I spoke with you, some plants, they've never seen so much crab going through in their lives. I did get a pretty snarky Facebook message from another producer and had to inform him that I don't do business over Facebook, and I find it quite unprofessional, but again, not surprising. But it seems that, as I've said a million times, no response is a response, right? And it doesn't seem that anybody else has been willing to come out and try to explain to us what's going on. I've spoken to harvesters after I spoke to you who said, yeah, you know what? I knew there was something not quite adding up. I landed with 100,000 pounds of premium RSW crab, and it went straight on a truck with a New Brunswick license plate. And he's like, I've been fishing 30 years. This never happened. And, people are waking up, Patty. Clearly, companies had employees going around, managers, owners, going around trying to create a false crisis. Plant workers have caught on to this now because they were hearing it. Well, we don't know what's going on. It must be that darn free enterprise. It must be those outside buyers shipping out all that crab. And what it was doing was creating a divide between our members in the plants and on the boats. But what this has actually done, Patty, I think they've shot themselves in the foot a little bit, because I don't think I've ever seen this union so united. Because plant workers have caught on, harvesters have caught on to the fact that they're buying it here for $4.97, shipping it out there and selling it to a plant for $7 or $7.50, and it's straight money in their pocket minus trucking costs. So, I think there's a little bit of the members of ASP still think we're back in the days where we come with our hat in our hands at the end of the season, right? And you get your bag of flour and you say, thank you, sir, may I have some more? But plant workers aren't stupid. Harvesters aren't stupid. Government's not stupid. And this union's certainly not stupid. This is not my grandfather's fishery. This is not my grandfather's union. And if ASP thinks that we are going to sit back, let this go, and just let it go quietly, they're sadly mistaken, because we're just getting started.
Let me bounce this off you, and I've heard this concern voiced, is that at one point the FFAW and others are talking about the need to allow outside buyers in. Of course, and that's the air of competition. Maybe that would drive price. So outside buyers come in, take the unprocessed crab out, which is what's happening now. So was some of this initiated or instigated by the call for free enterprise and outside buyers? Because that's what we're getting. We're getting outside buyers taking unprocessed crab, and we're getting local producers, local processors doing the same thing. So how is it different when an outside buyer does it versus when someone who operates in the province does it?
So just to clarify that a little bit, Patty, the amount of crab that's going out by outside buyers is minuscule. The majority is being shipped out by inside buyers. And a call for outside buyers is to create competition. We know the price disparity that's been happening between the Maritimes and harvesters here. Now, we understand that there are trucking costs. We live on an island. We understand the realities of that. But when you're looking at $1.50, $2, $2.50, it's hard to square the circle. So when we're talking about competition, these OCI, Quinlan's, Beathic, Berry Group, these local companies, fish processing and fish buying is a privilege. You owe it to your communities, you owe it to the people in those communities to create work. Government agrees there. So that product should be going through your plant. So if somebody's going to come in here and take that product for a higher price, you should be concerned. What's the solution? I don't know. Maybe pay harvesters a fair price. Then there's no incentive for somebody else to come in. Then you can provide good jobs in the plant, good wages. But what's happening here is clearly, and I mean, I've heard it myself, trying to teach us a lesson and create a false crisis, as I said, of, oh my God, look what outside buyers are doing. But that's not the case. All they have to do is pay a fair price to harvesters, put it through the plant, everybody is happy, communities are thriving, there's good work. But instead, these guys would rather undercut harvesters, leave plants shuttered, leave plant workers without work, and ship it off all for their own bottom line. I mean, all we hear is how community conscious they are. Some of them are getting awards right now for all the great work they do in their communities. I don't see this as being responsible to anybody in any community in Newfoundland and Labrador. I see this as, like OCI stated, a long-time partnership with one of their buddies in the Maritimes and letting him profit off it. You know, there has to be some accountability here, and there has to be some consequences. You have to be accountable to workers, and you have to be accountable to fish harvesters. You have to be accountable to the province that you're operating in. I think government needs to make that very, very clear to these processors that that license is a privilege, and the second that the beneficial interest of that license leaves this province, it should also leave their hands.
I wonder, is there any specific reference in the license to this specific issue itself? I don't know.
I wouldn't know either. I mean, I've never seen a buyer's license. I have seen Mr. O'Leary's outside buyer's license because, of course, they've tried to bully and intimidate him and trying to take him to arbitration right now to get him to cease operations. I mean, it's clear. Any competition, anybody wants to come in here, anybody wants to flourish, any growth within this industry, they just want to stifle it. They've had a stranglehold on the fishery, on harvesters and plant workers for so long that they don't know how to operate otherwise. I mean, we would love to work together and to see how we can make this industry work, but it seems like that's only one-sided. We're the only ones that want to find ways for harvesters to make more money, for plant workers to get more work, and to keep our communities thriving. I mean, if OCI could put it all on a trawler and process it elsewhere and, you know, pack up shop, I'm pretty convinced that they'd be more than happy to do that. It's unfortunate. I mean, it's not how this industry should be operating because there are dollars leaving this province. There are dollars leaving the pockets of our members, and it just needs to stop. Government needs to step in here, put the boots to these guys, and say, you are operating under a license as provided by us as a privilege. You don't own it, and you're going to start operating in a way that's ethical and in a way that's going to benefit Newfoundland and Labrador.
I'm curious to see if I can get my eyes on a buyer's license now, and I'll throw this out there. Representatives of OCI or Quinlan's or the ASP themselves are all welcome to come on the show and speak to what we've heard in this conversation, and I appreciate your time, Dwan. Thank you.
Thanks, Patty. I don't think you'll have them all lined up in the queue very quickly.
We'll see what we can do.
Have a great day.
You too, Dwan. Take care. Dwan Street, the president at the FFAW. Very quick note regarding parking in the fire lane. Someone made this point via email, and it's a good one. General rule of thumb, if I'm parked in a parking lot and a moving car hits me, it's their fault. But if I'm parked illegally, and I'm not sure if the technical term is illegal, because in the fire lane, unless there's an emergency, apparently that's not illegal. But you might be deemed to be at fault if you're parked in the parking lane and a moving car hits you. Interesting thought. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll speak with you. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Good morning, Sterling. You're on the air.
Yes, hey, I listen to your show all the time. This is my first time.
Just 1 second, Sterling. That's a bum phone line. Let's try line number 2. Mike, you're on the air.
Good day, Patty.
Excellent today. You?
Pretty good. I'm sure you're familiar with that artillery shell that they fired off Bill Allen.
Yeah, I am.
Okay. I'd like to call up on Fred Hutton, MHA for here and everything, somebody to come on and explain why they set that off yesterday in a controlled environment, they says, which over here on Bill Allen, they said they felt it over in Paradise, Portugal Cove, whatever, for the explosion that made without any notice going out to the residents of Bill Allen or anywhere surrounding areas.
The question I would have about that, Mike, is would that have even been the province doing that, or would that have been handled by a federal body? I wonder.
Yeah, well, it's a question for sure, but whoever is responsible, all they had to do a few days ago was put that on the news. People with Facebook and everything else, I mean, people could have been aware of what was going to happen, rather than seniors that was around me that I spoke to, that a couple of them said they almost felt like they're going to take a heart attack just due to the explosion. Just like I said, for something that they're going to do like that, I mean, how often are you going to hear something like that? That they found an artillery shell and they're going to set it off and due to the explosion from it. I mean, the last time we had something like that, I think, was that piece of meteor that struck Whiteack.
Yeah, because I mean, we'll even get contracting companies put public notices out when they're doing some blasting in their own quarry, just to give people a heads up to know what's going on. So that's a fair point. The only reason I asked about whether or not that would have been a federal body is just so I can ask the right person. Because
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'll figure that out, because that's a very good point. I got a couple of emails overnight saying that people had the you-know-what scared out of them when they had no idea what was going on, but it was a massive explosion apparently, which just goes also to point out how potentially lucky that fisherman got. I mean, that something didn't go wrong. Anyway, and I don't know what it took to set it off, but that's a good question, Mike. I will get an answer to that.
They said it was a person in Portugal Cove. I don't know if their house shook or the window shook, and even Paris Paradise. And again, like I said, all they had to do is whoever is responsible was put out a notice. And like I said, you know yourself, at Facebook, the news or whatever, just to get people heads up. In the next couple of days, they're going to defuse this or whatever. You're going to hear it loud. Boom or whatever, and there's nothing to worry about.
Good point. I'll get an answer for you, Mike, and I appreciate making time for the show.
One quick thing about the disabled parking and stuff around the malls and any place where there's big chain stores or whatnot.
Yep.
I think those places should put out cameras and put out signs, not on the building, but something that they could put out during the day, stand-up ones that they could put along there or space them and say, you're going to be recorded and tickets will be issued to anybody that's there for any length of time, or even to pull in there that shouldn't be. That might solve the problem too.
Yeah, it could certainly play a role, but if people are willing to ignore fire lane, they're probably willing to ignore whatever sign you put out there. Anyway, the obliviousness is...
Around, and they got to post it, and I mean, whether it's the police or the city that comes and reviews the videos, and whoever's there parked, and they can see it and got their license plate number, then it's no difference than on the highway or with the cameras issuing tickets for speeders or anything else.
Fair enough. Appreciate the time, Mike. Thanks for the call.
Okay, Paddy. Have a good day.
You too, sir. Bye-bye. All right, before the next break, let's go to line number one. Say good morning to the leader of the NDP. He's the member for St. John's Centre. That's Jim Dinn. Jim, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. Thank you for having me on.
No problem at all.
Listen, I want to talk a little bit about our affordability town hall tonight, but before I do want to send out my best to the people of Badger and the fact that they're under an evacuation alert. I drove by there this past weekend, and it was hot. A week before it was pouring rain, and it's just amazing how tender dry this situation is. I really hope that their lives and their property and their well-being is we can avoid any real tragedy there for sure.
Hope so. Fingers crossed.
Okay, so tonight, this is one of a few town halls we've had. Last time we had a town hall, it focused mostly around rent and rent hikes. I'm sure that'll factor into the discussion, but it's at the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 1 on Black Marsh Road. It's from 7 to 9. It's obviously free and open to anyone. We'll have some light refreshments there for people, and we'll have guest speakers, Mark Nichols and Laurabelle Emba, who will be speaking about they're as advocates about affordability and what can be done to address the situation. I've spoken to it on many occasions, but part of the thing tonight is the event tonight is to hear directly from people. I know that it's still a struggle when it comes to rent and food, but part of it is to hear the stories, to hear possibly even discuss possible solutions, and to what they would like to see, I guess, from a government, a provincial, and maybe a federal government perspective. So hopefully it's going to be a lively discussion. I've already had a few people who reached out there. They're planning to come. I met one person at the event at City Hall last night on the city plan. So it's still a topic that's very much important for people.
Fair enough, Jim. Anything else you want to say before we take a break?
No, one thing I might call in is the whole thing with regards to the schools, but I'll save that for another time. But the key thing here for the night is if you've got an issue around affordability, please come. I'd love to hear from you, the good, the bad, and the suggestions.
Appreciate your time, Jim. Let me know how it goes.
I will.
Okay, bye-bye. It's Jim Dinn, leader of the NDP, member of St. John's Centre. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll see if we have a clearer phone line with Sterling. He's got an issue with the bank. Don't go away. Welcome back. Let's go. Line number 6. Sterling, you're on the air.
Yes, Patty. My first time ever calling you guys. I listen to your show all the time. Now, I got a little problem. Back in 2021, I've been dealing with this bank in, I think it's Alberta. And I've been doing it right up until April of this year, right? And they sent out notices saying they were changing the banking system on our cards and everything. I've been calling them for the last 3 months now. They always told me 7 to 14 days I'll get my bank card for the last 3 months. Now, I'm a bit frustrated with this. I'm just wondering if there's anybody else out there that deals with this bank. And if there is, I like for them to give me a call if they're having trouble with it.
Just so I understand, you're just waiting for a replacement bank card? Is that what you said?
That's all I'm waiting for, a replacement bank card ever since April 15th of this year.
It's pretty fundamental stuff. I mean, generally, if I have a problem with the bank card, they give me a temporary one. A week later, it shows up in my mailbox.
Yeah, I know. I deal with another bank besides, and that card ran out there, I say, about 2 months ago. I just went to this bank because it's not that far away from me, and to give me a replacement card right away.
Yeah, that's generally how it works, and it's pretty easy stuff. I mean, they can put together a temporary bank card in a couple of minutes.
Yes. I know, but apparently this bank is in like I said, up in Alberta. I've been dealing with, and apparently they're having trouble getting me a bank card. Like I said, I've been waiting ever since I called them on April past. It was on the 15th of April. They said 7 to 14 days I should have that bank card in my mail. Now, This is 3 months now I've been waiting on this bank card. So I don't understand how long it will take to come from Alberta to here in the mail.
Well, it shouldn't take longer than the 7 to 14 days.
No, it shouldn't, should it?
No, absolutely not.
I'm after calling them. I'm sorry for cutting you off, sir.
Of course.
I'm after calling them at least 6 times now and talking to different people about it, and they're saying that they can't give me the manager's bank phone number, and if I want to switch to transfer that money, I got to come up with a banking system, a bank report from here, stating that I am the person into this other bank. I always thought if you owned another bank card, I always thought if you give them your bank account number, they can transfer the money right over. I don't understand this stuff.
Is it possible to go to the bank physically and ask to see what the heck is going on?
Well, I'm here in Newfoundland. Okay.
Oh, so this branch is in Alberta. Okay, right.
Yeah, it's not here. It's not here in Newfoundland. Right. It's in Alberta, right?
But the same bank that has, an office here, a bank here, they should be able to answer this question for you, or at least get to the bottom of it on your behalf.
Well, as far as I know, there is no branch from them down here in Newfoundland.
Okay, so what bank is this then?
It's a DC bank.
I'm not even familiar with that.
I'm not either. That's the first time I heard of it. Like I've been dealing with them ever since. Like all my GST and everything went into this account, and the card I had here, I've been getting the money out of my account ever since last year, 2021, right up until now. I don't understand it.
Me neither. I wish I had somewhere to direct you, but I'm not even familiar with the DC Bank and their status. I appreciate the time. Sterling, let me know if this gets worked out tout de suite.
Yes, I certainly will, sir. And I really appreciate your time taking the time to talk.
Happy to do it. Good luck.
Good luck, sir. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Bye-bye. All right, see you quickies before we run out of time. Line 4, Pat, you're on the air. Hi, Pat. Hello, Pat. Line number 4. Pat, going once.
Hello?
Hi.
Oh, is this, Patty?
It is.
Okay, I haven't called in a while, but since I've become a senior, I can't help but notice that, and I have a decreasing arthritis problem, and I have to use a cane. And I'm still independent. I go out and do these different things. And everywhere I go, Patty, the teenagers, how are you? Do you need any help? Can I get you something? And they're mostly boys. And I have a son who's like that. And I took note of this 2 weeks ago about... I hear people someone always knocking down a teenager, you know. But these teenagers that I have come across have been nothing but fantastic. They've been raised well by their families, obviously, and they treat me with nothing but respect. I was out last night. I went to Walmart and do a bit of workout there, and when I was leaving, I went out to wait for the go bus. And this lady stopped. And she said, "How are you this evening, ma'am?" I said, "Fine, very good." She said, "I noticed you're standing there a while." She said, "Can we do something for you?" I said, "No, the go bus is coming, but thanks a million, right?" And everywhere I go, okay, everywhere I go, I have not run into one teenager in the city that has stopped me off. They treat me with respect. They open the door. They even help me with my groceries.
I'm really glad to hear it, because unfortunately teenagers get painted with the same brush that they're lazy and they're rude and stuff. Well, that's not my experience either. So I'm really glad to hear that's your experience with positivity and nice kids trying to do good things for you.
Yes, and I would say these teenagers are helping other people too. And they speak well, and I don't know, I'm just a little amazed. Not surprised, but I guess a bit amazed, because I hear so many negative comments, right?
Yeah, and that's just nature of the beast, but I'm glad you're sharing this positive story. Thank you very much, Pat.
And I'm sure your 2 boys now are the same.
I sure hope so.
I'm sure they are.
I think they are, yeah. I'm lucky. Thank you, Pat. Appreciate your time.
Okay, Patty. Talk to you later.
Okay, sounds good. Bye-bye. All right, hopefully we only got about 30 seconds. Andrew Safer is a mindfulness instructor. Joins us on 5. Andrew, you're on the air.
Hello, thank you, Patty. I'm going to be presenting a workshop called Inner Compass, and it's looking at our inner guidance and how that might relate to dealing with fake news and disinformation. It's at 4:30 today on Zoom, and if anyone's interested, they can email safermindfulness@gmail.com.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I wish we had more time, but you're always welcome.
Okay, thanks so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right, good show today. Big thanks to all hands, and we will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. Please stay with us for the Mental Health Matters Radiothon on all the Stingray Radio Network here in the province. I'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.